Warning, this podcast has stories of real-life events and true crime that happens every day. These stories may contain adult language and graphic or disturbing details not suitable for everyone. Listener discretion is advised. In our society, most people are content to go through their daily lives safely and peacefully. But our society is not always safe or peaceful. For that reason, some men and women answer a higher calling to defend and protect their fellow man. You probably know someone who is one of these people, or maybe you are one of these people. The ones who see and do the things most people would never want to. These things are sometimes heroic and beautiful, but often they are horrific and terrifying. It's these things they don't share about with other people. It's these things they carry with them, so you don't have to. But when they get together, they talk to each other about them. And they call these stories war stories.
Welcome to another episode of War Stories. I'm Tom.
And I'm Chuck.
Hey, Chuck, is that a Watch 3 apparel shirt I see?
It is.
Man, I love Watch 3 apparel, not just because it's comfortable and not just because they do all of our shirts, but because everything they do is designs from the perspective of a street cop born and raised in LA.
Exactly. And it exemplifies their life experiences. So go to watch3apparel.com, put the code in War Stories to get yourself a discount on some of their gear, help support them, and help support us at War Stories.
And we're back for another episode, and I'm looking forward to these. You know, we get some old school episodes. We get young guys, we get guys that are currently in law enforcement, but I personally love the old school episodes. And in fact, I'm part of a vintage LAPD group, and I posted a picture. You'll never believe this, Chuck. I walk into my daughter's room. My daughter's 20. I walk into her room, and she's wearing an old powder blue T-shirt from an LAPD like charity marathon relay race from 1986. And
How'd you get that?
So I recognized the T-shirt. I'm like, that was my father's T-shirt that my mother used to wear when he was at work. That then apparently my wife stole from my mother when my mother didn't fit it anymore. And now my daughter has stolen it from my wife and wears it to bed as her like comfy shirt. And it's here's this LAPD shirt that's probably 35 years old, and it's a family heirloom.
Oh, that's awesome. That's great.
I love the old school stuff. And we've got probably author and old school copper. One guest that I probably am looking forward to most is Danny Smith. How are you, sir?
I'm good, thank you. Good to be on here, man. I appreciate you guys having me.
Oh yeah,
great to have you.
We happy to. And so you just tell the audience a little bit about yourself. I know you wrote a book and you're retired law enforcement. Just kind of how you came into law enforcement and what you've been doing since, as my father puts it, recovering from law enforcement.
Exactly. So I've been retired for 18 years. I hired on in '83. I did 21 years, and that was as far as I could make it. And in the book that I wrote, I talk about that. I left with PTSD, and I was a pretty broken man. And it's taken me this long to write that book, and I hope all the cops read it because, you know, one of the things I talk about in there is that a lot of cops, they're hurting. You know, they crawl into bottles, they do stupid shit. I've had several friends kill themselves, and as you guys know, we have more law enforcement suicides than we have line of duty deaths every year.
Yeah,
so
anyway,
I don't want to get too far off on that, but the point is, you know, that I've been gone for a while. I actually didn't grow up wanting to be a cop necessarily. You know, I mean, I played cops when I was a little kid and stuff, but ultimately when I got out of high school, and you know, go to the local community college, which was a joke because I hated school, absolutely hated going to school. But I get a job doing security work, and my two bosses were retired LAPD guys. And man, I just love these guys. They were like men's men, and everything about them, you know, the way they talked to people, the way they joked about shit. They'd tell their war stories to each other, or
right,
you know, get to reminiscing. And I'm sitting there eating this up. And I'm like, I like these guys, man. This is what I want to do. I want to be a cop. And so they kind of became mentors. And interestingly, both of them told me to go with the sheriffs and not LAPD. saying, LAPD's best days are behind.
Yeah.
Best days are behind.
And that was in the 80s?
That was in the 80s, dude.
Yeah, that was in the 80s.
That was when,
That was in
no
the
matter
80s.
what the sheriff's department did to screw the pooch, LAPD would always do something a month later to screw it even bigger.
Well, and back then, the sheriff didn't take any shit. So,
Sherman Block was, dude, he was a...
Well, we were coming off the Pitches era, and Pitches had all the politicians and all the newspaper people. He had everyone dirty. Like, there was actually a unit that basically just had everyone dirty. It was the closest thing to organized crime you'd want in law enforcement, certainly. But, I mean, people didn't mess with him. Pitches was not to be messed with. And then Block came in behind him, and he certainly changed that quite a bit, and probably for the better. But still, the sheriff, he had a lot of power. He's an elected official. He's not appointed by a mayor. And he answers to the board of supervisors. And right now our current sheriff is battling with them nonstop. But it's still a different position than being a mayor or being appointed.
Right. You can't fire him.
No, you can't fire him.
No.
You
have to indict or impeach.
Yeah.
But you can fire a chief.
Oh boy.
Mm-hmm.
It's the mayor's. Well, I don't know why the mayor just doesn't become the chief of police, because nothing
That's how they run
really
it.
comes from the chief. It comes straight from the mayor, and the chief
Yeah.
just disseminates the information.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's
So
what
anyway, they
happened
told
when
me.
Chiefs lost their civil service protection, but
So they told
Which
me
is
to go with
politics.
the sheriff's department, and I processed with the sheriff's department. I processed with LAPD as a backup. I waited 3 months and applied to them. They actually went faster, and they were about ready to hire me. And I went down to the sheriff's department, knocked on the door, and said, "Hey, I want to work here." And you guys are kind of lollygagging, and they put my case up front. I got hired pretty quickly after that. And I had a great career. I spent a couple of years in the jail, which back in those days that was standard, and
Right.
about 2.5 years. And then I went to patrol in Firestone Station, which is South LA, and I was there through I got there in 86 and stayed there. Made detectives in 91 at Firestone, stayed there till they closed the doors in 94, opened up Century Station. And in 96, I got really lucky. I promoted to Detective Division, Special Investigations Bureau, Metro Detail, and worked there for a year. It was kind of already lined up that homicide was going to take me in 1 year. So they kind of brokered a deal, and that's where that was my goal, to get to homicide, and I did in 97. So
that's
retired out of there.
Great place to end up, man. The sheriff's department's homicide unit's one of the best in the world. So
yeah, it is. And it's a hardcore place to work. At the time, I think we're averaging 350, 400 murders a year, and we have it's a centralized bureau, 6 teams of 8 to 12 investigators per team, and you get a lot of experience there. There were guys that I worked with there who had already been there 20 years and had 1,000 murders under their belt. So
Wow.
It's very, very hard to not shine at a place like that. I mean, I'm not that bright of a guy, but man, you're just surrounded by these guys that had so much experience and everything. It was hard not to be good at your job, and they helped you.
Frank and Gil.
Yeah, Frank and Gil, and
they're I know they're the famous ones, but still, they're good cops. They're good police.
And you worked with them, correct?
Yeah, I didn't work with Frank. Frank was gone before I left, and Frank Salerno is who you're obviously referring to.
Yeah.
His son was there.
Sorry, a little inside baseball we're talking about.
Yeah.
Frank Salerno, the guy, he's a very famous detective.
He's a legend. He and Gil are perhaps most famous, of course, for the Night Stalker case.
Right.
Frank was gone before I got there. I've met him. I know him. His son came there about, I think, a year or two after I got there. So I worked with his son for quite a few years. He's a great guy.
Wow, legacy. Okay.
Yeah, and he's a class act, great guy. We were never partners, never even on the same team, but he's just a good guy. Gil was there. No, Gil was gone when I got there. He came back as a lieutenant, but I knew Gil from years. Everyone knew Gil. And he's a great guy. In fact, I was fortunate. I go back. I told you I'm in Idaho now, and I was down in California down in Los Angeles I think it was in November, promoting my recent book, and going to a couple of little reunions anyways. And I wanted to get together with the guys from Homicide, they were going to have a meet. It just didn't work out. But Gil called me and said, "Where are you?" And gave me coordinates to a place I'd never been, and we met there and had some drinks for a few hours and
a little choir practice for old time's sake.
Yeah, it was good. It was good bullshitting
Nice.
with Gil. So
Nice.
But and to answer your question about the book, so when I left there, I mean, I had never planned to write a book because, as any cop knows, you know, if you reflect back and think, God damn, if I was going to write a book, I would have kept a journal every day.
Right.
You know? I can remember
Right,
the
yeah.
best of days, the worst of days, some of the funniest shit, but the everyday minutia, you know, I mean, if you had kept track of all those little things, I mean, it'd be hilarious. And in fact, my worst story,
a daily journal.
yeah, and you know, in fact, my worst story that I'm going to tell you later on, you guys are going to think, Jesus Christ, that didn't make it in the memoir. I didn't even think about it until after the memoir is published. I'm like, I can't believe I didn't tell that story, so I'm going to tell it to these guys.
Right.
But
Yeah. You know what ends up happening is we've done this show long enough to where we've seen what happens is that people go, I don't have any stories, and I'm like, just come on, we'll chat.
yeah,
And they come on, and all of a sudden they're like, oh, that reminds me. And as you just start going, this stuff just starts coming back. And if you had a journal, you could refer to that. But, you know, memory has to be stimulated by something, either a journal or sitting around having a drink with your buddies.
I was going to
And,
say,
you know-
getting together with other cops, you just start bullshitting.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that has to do with a lot of the stuff that we see. It's a natural reaction for the body to suppress memories and
Yeah.
things like that. And it doesn't, your body doesn't have a code of, I'm going to suppress these select memories because they're bad. It's just like from a time frame, memories start getting suppressed, and you just deal with so much stuff, especially working in major metropolitan areas, major counties, and things like that. You come in contact with so many crazy things. And the funny thing is that me and my buddies were joking. I was joking one day, and I was like, man, if we could just have a reality show, you know, and they just followed us around, not like cops, but like inside shit,
Right.
Like the day-to-day stuff, that the razzing in the station,
Yeah.
the funny shit you see in your car.
It's because nobody
Like-
wants to watch 2.5 hours of filling out DUI paperwork.
Well, no, you know, I mean, transients doing crazy shit, like you're just sitting out on a patrol.
Yeah,
The
no, you're
crazy
right.
things you come up with in the car, the crazy transient you see breakdancing in the middle of the intersection, and
Yeah.
people look at you like, "Hey, do something," and you're like,
You know,
All right.
Chuck,
you know,
Chuck, I'll give you one, and I just thought of this, you know, not long ago, and it's not in my book or anything, but my partner and I were down in Compton doing a surveillance, and we're target specific, and it's kind of a deal where, you know, we're just waiting for this guy to move, and we're sitting there, and it's hard for a couple of white guys to fit in anyway, so we're a long ways away, we're looking through glass. Everyone knows we're cops, but we're sitting there, and this lady walks by, and it's 2:00 in the afternoon, and she's in her muumuu and her slippers, and she's got her hair in,
It's always the damn
in
muumuu
curlers. Yeah, and she walks down the block and into the liquor store, and then pretty soon she comes back, and she's got a bag that's obviously, you know, full of liquor and her cigarettes, and she walks back by and into the pad, and so this is 5-10 minutes of time. Now, neither of us said anything to each other during all of this. And about 10 minutes later, finally my partner looks over, he goes, "Do you realize how fucked up we are?" And I start laughing because most people would look at that lady right there and think that was odd, but we've been down here too long, you know? And it's true.
Right.
It's like, you know, it's 2:00 in the afternoon, and here's this lady in her freaking robe and her pajamas, and she's buying her liquor and getting back to the couch, and we thought nothing of it.
Longtime listeners of this podcast will know
Right.
the joke about the flaming donkey, where one of our Marines came on to talk about the invasion of Iraq and said, you know, yeah, then there was, you know, just this guy had a cart with a donkey pulling it, and the donkey was on fire, and it was just like, oh, hey, look, the donkey's on fire, you know. It's the absurdity of the things that become normal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Donkey.
I always-
That's great.
I always loved driving into work, and I take a couple different routes into work, and I would drive into work, and you'd see these crazy fucking people on the side of the road doing some crazy shit, and you're like, you're seeing dope, you're seeing them tag, and then you get in your uniform and you go through your roll call, and you're about an hour later, and you're like, I'm gonna go back to that same spot, and these fucking people are still there, and you're like, money,
Yeah.
you're mine. You know, it's just, it was funny.
No.
But
Well, I'm if your main story is anything close to your little quick story, I'm can't wait. So you have the mic. What is your story?
Oh, okay. All right. So to set the scene, again, it's late 80s. It may have been 90, 91, but I'm pretty sure it was like 89, somewhere in there. I'm working with a guy. His name's Daryl Griffith. I'm going to just put that out there. He doesn't care, I don't think. But I used to call him the Ninja Hillbilly. Now Griff is, we call him Short Griff, but he was a great guy and a great partner. And he is this big kind of a redneck guy, that's why we called him a hillbilly. And the dude used to kickbox. And if you looked at him, you wouldn't expect him to be a kickboxer. I mean, he's just a big guy. But he used to actually kickbox and do the actual fighting and stuff. And this is long before, the MMA was so popular. So all of us were like, holy shit, man, this guy's a badass. So we call him the Ninja Hillbilly. And he was a great partner and a good dude. And I don't know if you guys ever used the term, the arrest gods. Have you ever talked about making sacrifices to the arrest gods?
We would say the police gods, but yeah.
Okay, so
same concept.
Police gods.
So down back in the 80s and 90s, and probably still now. I mean, it wasn't that hard to make an arrest down in Firestone, down in South LA, and and it also wasn't unusual to hear gunfire. In fact, it wasn't unusual to see gunfire. Most guys that worked there any length of time at all had been in shootings and had witnessed shootings and roll around the corner and people were shooting each other and seeing murders.
It's a war zone in the 80s.
Yeah. So all of that's going on a lot. But there were still nights where nothing would happen. And we were all predators. We were hunters,
Right.
And that's what we got off on, right? I mean, every night you went 10-8 and you were looking for bad guys, man.
Yeah.
So it was just a weird night that was quiet. And we were rolling around, me and the hillbilly were rolling around and took a few things, just couldn't get anything. So the legend was that, hey, sometimes you got to make a sacrifice to the arrest gods, just take some chicken shit misdemeanor, hook them up, take them in, book them, because we didn't go out of our way to look for misdemeanors because he's usually too busy there to do that. But, hey, it's this slow, frickin' take a hype to jail, even a drunk driver. I mean, something, get a misdemeanor arrest and try to appease the arrest gods. Right. And then they will, rain on you felonies. You'll have, you'll be hooking and booking in no time. Right. So we were working early morning shift or the graveyard
sacrificing
shift.
A donut.
Yeah. And it's like 2 or 3 in the morning. Right. And we're on Central Avenue and we're driving up the street and here's these male Hispanics that are going up the road. There's 3 of them in the car and they are all over the road. I mean, like these guys couldn't drive a straight line to save their lives, or well, the driver couldn't, and the 2 guys with him ended up they were just as drunk as he was. But I mean, it was the most obvious drunk in the world, and he's just all over the place. And I said, well, this is as good a time as any to appease the rest gods, because this guy, we can't let him go down the road. He's going to kill somebody. So we light him up. He turns off of Central Avenue, and there's alleys that the whole place is full of alleys down there. And of course, alleys down there are not great places to hang out, but, we stalked them quite regularly, but, alleys is where a lot of times you'd see people creeping around and trouble happening and so forth. And this guy turns right onto, I think it was 59th Street. We're just south of Slauson, kind of almost in the north end of our area, just south of Newton Division. And they turn and they stop just past the alleyway. So we stop our vehicle and it is actually in the alley. It's like blocking the north-south alley. Like you could look out the driver's window and look north up the alley all the way to Slauson, sure. Look south all the way down to, whatever the next street was, 60th or whatever. And we get out and we walk up, we contact the occupants. The driver's so drunk, I mean, he can't even talk. And it's like, this is no brainer. The guy's going to jail. So we get him out. I get the driver out. I was driving that night and I pat him down. I hook him up and the other guy is getting out of the other side. Normally we wouldn't allow this, but these guys are so drunk. We know there's no way we're going to communicate to them. Hey, slide over, get out the driver's side. So Hillbilly, he just snatches the guy out of the passenger seat, puts him up against the car. He's patting him down. I'm walking back to the radio car, and all of a sudden, there's about 12 gunshots. Boom, 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 boom.
Oh shit!
And these are close. I mean, these are like you can hear the snaps going across the tops of our heads.
Damn.
So it's like we're being shot
really
at.
Close.
You know, I mean, someone's firing rounds at us. You know, I mean, they weren't close enough. The shooter obviously wasn't close enough that, you know, it was, but they were sending rounds our way, kind of a, you know, hey,
right.
You know,
one of them could be unlucky or lucky, depending
absolutely,
on who
perspective. Absolutely.
Right.
So Griff grabs his guy, throws him down the ground, hooks him up, grabs the other guy, hooks him up. And this is back, you know, we didn't have handheld radios down there. I mean, LA Sheriff's Department, you know, we were years behind other departments, but we didn't have handheld radios till I think 90. I want to say sometime in the 90s, but we didn't have handheld radios. So we're dealing with what we've got. We shove all these guys in the back seat, and we look up the alley, and there's this group of people standing in the alley. And it was the strangest thing ever, because it's like they're just standing there, and we're thinking, oh, maybe someone shot at them. I mean, most of them were looking in our direction, but they didn't appear excited. And there were some females, there were males and females. So we put out something on the radio. I don't, you know, remember, you know, hey, I need a backup up here. There's shots fired. And we literally go trotting up the alley with our guns out. And we're yelling at these people, let's see your hands, see your hands, see your hands. And they're all hands up, and they're very calm. I mean, it was a strange thing. So we get there, and we said, where'd the shots come from? And they're looking at each other and kind of like, I don't know. And someone turns and looks up the alley, and I follow, I think it was the female that did. I follow her gaze, and I look up there, and here's this 63 Impala lowrider backing out of a driveway. And this looks like a gangster car, right? And there's three gangsters in the car. I mean, these guys are, you could tell from there, and I'm 50 yards from them, but you could tell these are gangsters, man. Shaved head, you know, riding low, and they're in this gangster-looking ride, and they're backing out. So we leave these guys, and we go running up the alley, and now we're pointing our guns at them. I mean, we're just pointing our guns at everyone. We're, you know, let's see your hands, let's see your hands. And we run up the alley, and one of the backup units got there right as we were getting there, so they couldn't go anywhere, and they stopped, and they threw their hands up. So we're getting them out of the car, and this old cholo, and this guy was pretty cool, but I mean, this guy's like, he was a cholo back, you know, in the day, right? He comes out of his apartment. He's like, what the fuck's going on out here? Hey, dude, who's got my car? So these guys were stealing this guy's car. At the same time, all this other shit's going on, and none of them have guns, and we don't find any guns around there or shell casings anywhere. I mean, it's like, this is the most bizarre thing ever. So
these three dudes just happened to jack an OG Cholo's ride at the same time as two deputies are trying to jam a dude up while taking rounds.
Correct.
That's just piss poor fucking timing.
I mean, this is Firestone. You can't even make this shit up. I mean, in addition to my memoir, I've written 7 novels. I got 7 published novels, and I'm like, I can't make shit up that good. You know, people say, hey, do you, you know, base some of your stuff in your books on things that have happened? I'm like, well, of course, because I'm not that creative. I mean, you can't make up things they're more interesting, more bizarre than what cops see out there every day. You know, the old
and we're cops. Let's face it, we're not going to do the extra work to make up a story when we've got it.
I mean, we might embellish one.
Right, sure. We know how to write a report, but God damn it, I'm not going to go invent a story when I've got a perfectly good one right here.
And the characters, same thing. I mean, you can't make up better characters than the idiots we work with, right? I mean,
God, no.
Everyone's nuts. So anyway, the assisting unit detains these guys, and me and the hillbilly, we go walking back down the alley like, what the hell has just happened here? And so now things are kind of calm. We got a lot of extra units there, and we go up. Now we can talk to each of these people down the alley, and we're pulling them aside. And while we're pulling them aside, now we're looking around on the ground. Well, there's shell casings all over the place. So I'm like, okay, wait a minute, man. Someone here is full of shit.
Right.
So
Right.
That's what we call a clue.
A clue. So we're pulling them aside one by one and searching them and doing the old thing, put your hand on their heart and, feel their chest.
Right.
And no one's chest is bouncing out of their freaking shirt. I mean, no one's scared to death, but yet here's these casings. And I mean, the shots definitely came from that direction. And I mean, the Cholos didn't do it, or at least, unless they threw a gun over the fence. Finally, one of the females that was there, I've got her pulled to the side, and I told her, I said, look, we're just taking everyone to jail here, and she said, she kind of shakes her head, and then she's doing one of these kind of nodding. I know a lot of people listen and don't watch your podcast. Right. So she's kind of nodding and rolling her eyes in the direction of a house that's set off of the alley. Like we're kind of at the back gate to access the backyard of a house that was on another street. And there's a detached garage. And I look over, and this detached garage has a door, and this door is partially open.
No.
So, and that's not, I mean, and that's the truth. I didn't just make that up for the report, but literally we go over there and we kind of push the door open a little bit, shine our light inside. And here's this dude on the couch who's acting like he's asleep. and I hit the light, and I could see that he's sweating. Like he's got sweat all over his face. Like, get up, hands up. Do all that, yell out that magical police shit, right? Freeze, hands up. So we grab this guy, and sure enough, there's a gun underneath the pillow where he's laying. And that gun happens to be the same caliber of gun that the casings are outside. And its magazine is empty, and it smells like it is freshly fired. So we start putting two and two together, and for whatever reason, this guy, and he was freaking loaded, but for whatever reason, he decided, hey, there's the cops, I'm going to shoot at him, and then he bails into this freaking backyard and into this garage. And
was it even his garage?
Right?
Yeah, he actually lived in this. That was his crash pad. I mean, it was kind of like there's this couch he slept on back there, but. And then these idiots, I mean, they might have been the stupidest ones of the group, because I don't know why they stayed there when someone just shot at the cops, right? I mean, we're running at them, pointing guns at them, and they know that someone just shot at us. I mean, there's a pretty good chance we're going to let some lead fly if they do anything wrong, I mean, anything stupid at all. You've just been shot at. So anyway, so long story short, we had arrested a drunk driver and offered that up to the arrest gods.
Yeah.
Within 2 minutes of that happening, we have 3 Cholos in custody for Grand Theft Auto. We've got a shooter in custody for, we charge, of course, on the report, we charge it with attempt murder.
10.87.
The DA never buy that shit. But
no.
He probably got discharging in an inhabited dwelling or something like that.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, you're probably right. And
or knock it down to 80 W on one.
Yeah,
one PO. It's just slap on the wrist, basically.
I don't even think they did that actually, Chuck. But and also the gun had its serial number scraped off, so you got another felony there. And I think the guy was a convicted felon too. So I mean, the first 3 pages of my
probation,
report
he just told him it was an accident.
was listing all the crimes that we charged. And now we've got 5 guys to book. So we're pretty.
That's
happy.
Your shift.
We got a misdemeanor and 4 felons, and
that's overtime.
Ever since then, I believed in the arrest gods. Sometimes you had to make a sacrifice.
Yeah, and if you make them angry, you will know what happens.
Yeah,
you're going to take report call after report call after report call after report call.
It's like pissing off a dispatcher.
Oh,
you piss off a dispatcher, and you're like, oh shit. Next thing you know, your box is full. You clear a call, boom, another one. God,
Assist
like if
PCS.
cops have the arrest gods, dispatchers must have the arrest Virgin Mary that they can pray to, because holy crap, like. If you piss, I did it once, and she got caught for it, and she got her ass reamed by the watch commander. But if you don't think the dispatchers will hose cops, they will. They will absolutely hose you. And if they know it's you on the radio,
Oh yeah.
They'll send you all over. You'll be in the north, you'll be in the south, and you'll be in the fucking northeast and the southwest. And you're like, oh my God, what did I do?
Yeah. And for those of you from, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, you want to treat a dispatcher like you treat the person preparing your food.
Yeah. And probably better.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because they have your life right there in their hands.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and if you're one of these cops that works at a department like I did, where dispatch is in the same building as patrol, they had a dispatch. Stay away from those new dispatchers. It's nothing but trouble. Just stay out of dispatch. Stay out of dispatch.
That goes back to don't shit in your own kitchen, pal.
Yep. Don't dip your pen in the company ink.
Yep.
Don't
Don't shit where you eat. Don't
shit where you eat. Exactly.
The funny thing is that back in the day when you were like way back in the day when you were on patrol,
hey.
Oh,
wow, shots fired.
It's different.
Dinosaur.
Different policing now, though. It's crazy. Basics of police work are still the same, but the whole thing of appeasing the patrol gods, the police gods, the arrest gods, whatever you want to call it. Nowadays, you go and get a misdemeanor like DUI, whatever, a guy was just driving drunk, and you hook him up. That's your shift. Unless you're because the paperwork is so like ridiculous nowadays.
Oh yeah.
Unless you are a motor or you work these DUIs constantly, and you basically have it rubber stamped and just put in what you saw, and then everything else is the same. You could be done in and out maybe with booking 3 hours.
Oh wow.
It
was changing a little bit by the time I left patrol and went to detectives, but it was kind of funny. When you trained at Firestone, one of the rules was you had to be in and out of the station in 15 minutes with a booking. If you had,
oh wow!
And I mean, it was
or you were milking
time. Yeah, it was. You double timed everything, and the thing was, we had all 2-man cars down there, and so your bookman, the passenger, would be filling out the booking slip on the way in. Hey, what's your name? What's your address? And I mean, if he had ID, he's filling that out. But by the time he hits the back door, that booking slip, at least the first 9 lines should be complete. And then fill out a couple more things, get him to sign it, roll his prints. Back then we rolled, prints on. You had ink pad and paper cards, and you rolled the prints and while you were doing that, while one person was booking the body, the other person would go and get the arrest approved by the watch commander if it's a felony, the watch sergeant if it's a misdemeanor. But you'd be in and out in 15, 20 minutes, back out in your car, and then your partner's driving around, you guys are handling calls, or he's looking for someone else to arrest while the bookman is writing that report. We didn't sit in the station and write our reports. And on real busy nights, you might not get much report writing done because you're just constantly going from one hot call to another.
Well, you were writing in pencil then, right?
Number 2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I at least did not have to manually write reports, so we could type them on the MDCs in the car. And
you're fancy.
Yeah. But nobody did. Everybody went to the station, and they would be out at the station for report writing from like 3 a.m. to 5 a.m, because you could.
So yeah. So go for it.
Go ahead, Chuck.
I was gonna say, so for us, like, we would handwrite some easy ones, in the car, because depending on who the watch commander was,
right,
they wouldn't allow you in the station.
Right.
But then for the sheriff's department, and I'm assuming it was the same as it is still now, that when you bring a body in, if there's any excess property, the jailer or the detention officer, whoever you have there at the station, would do all of the excess property and stuff like that, so you don't have to do it, so you can clean your hands of it and get back out in the streets and do that. For other agencies, you have to, the officers, because there is no DOs or jailers at any of the stations or main areas unless you go to an actual jail facility, and then you have jailers or detention officers. You would actually have to fill out all of the excess property, tag it, number, itemize it, do a separate report just for that. And then once that's complete and you have all your booking sheets done, it's like 9 pages. You were like talking about 1 page. there's agencies out there that you have like six pages, if there's excess property, the bail schedule, you got the booking approval, you have all this other excess stuff. Sometimes you could end up with like 4 pages, 3 pages, 6 pages, depending on how much crap there is. And then you got to take all of that, bag it, and then take your body and take it somewhere else. It's just crazy. I think the sheriff's department has it streamlined to a point, and other agencies that I've been on ride-alongs with and talked to and dealt with, they have it so streamlined to where you can basically have the comments of your call now, input it and thrown into basic report. That way, when you get there, you're done in and out in an hour. With the body gone.
We would do we had a booking sheet from county jail that we'd have to fill out, right? So county jail would take them, because we were a city agency. So we took their forms from county jail. We'd had them available in our cars. So if I had an easy one, if it wasn't a complicated arrest, he just needed to go to jail, I'd, on the trunk of my car with him in the back, I'd spend 2 minutes filling out the PC statement and all his horsepower for the sheriff's department. And then I'd call the watch commander and be like, am I clear to go? And they'd be like, yep. And so I would literally just get in my car and drive straight to county. It was about a 25-minute drive. And I'd book him myself a county. And as soon as they blessed the PC statement, and as soon as that dude was searched and turned over to the deputies, I was out and headed back to the city, because they didn't want us to dick around with booking people. So a booking would be an hour, but you'd literally be 25 minutes driving to jail, 25 minutes driving back, and 10 minutes booking them.
Right.
So,
yeah. When I was getting out of patrol, they had just started the probable cause declaration, and there was a couple other, I don't even remember now, but a couple other forms. It seemed like just every few months, some we call them house fairies, the people that work downtown and make the decisions. They'd come up with something new that we had to do, some new policy, procedure, or whatever. And I remember that as I was leaving patrol, thinking, that shit's just they're getting out of control with this. And I'd just gone to detectives, and I'd been there about 2 months when, I brought someone in for something, I don't remember what, but I throw him in the booking cage, and he's in there, and he's on the phone right away. And I say, dude, not until I get your stuff filled out, because I need you to come over here and talk to me. And he basically tells me to FO. And so I yelled jailer gate, which, that's what you did when you needed to go in the booking cage. And I went in there and snatched him off the phone, by the scruff of his neck, and dragged him over to the frickin', table there where I needed him to stand until I was done booking him. And I get done, and he goes back to the phone, and we're both happy. He's,
Let me remind you which end of the leash you are on.
Yeah. Right. Well, I turned and started to walk back toward the detective bureau, and the watch sergeant, whose office was right across from the booking cage. He says, hey, Smith. And I stopped, and yeah, what's up, Dave? He says, I'm going to need a use of force report. And I looked at him, I said, you're going to need what? He said, use of force report. I said, you've got to be shitting me. He says, no. He says, you put your hands on that inmate, so I need a use of force. And I'm like, okay, all right. And
the writing
that was
on the wall.
That's what I'm telling you. I mean, that was like 91, the end of 91, I think, is when I went to detectives. And it was, it was not long after the Rodney King incident, and everything just changed. And I hadn't really wanted to go to Detective Bureau originally, because I love patrol, but the writing was on the wall. And when the detective sergeant asked me to put in, and he says, you need to come back to DB, I realized he's right. It's my time on the streets is over. As much as I loved working them, the game changed too much, and I didn't want. It was time to move on for me. So,
yeah, you have those moments, and look, patrol is definitely a young man's game for sure.
Yeah,
but you can stay in it for a good long time if you know how to play the game right. However, there does come a point where, your skills might be better served elsewhere, and your mental health and well-being might be better served elsewhere. Also, when patrol changes and the younger guys are able to adapt more to what's happening on the street, and sometimes the salty guys are like, oh, are you fucking kidding me? If somebody says that to me, I'm gonna stick my foot up his ass.
Right.
And you realize that if you do stick your foot up his ass, you'll end up in federal prison.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I can.
What's funny is you're talking about how the the guy wasn't listening. You grabbed him, you drug him over, placed him down, and sat him down so you could answer questions to get him off the phone because he wasn't listening. There's agencies out there now that even regardless of what, because a lot of agencies have body cams now, regardless of what your body worn shows or your body cam, or whatever you want to call it, as long as there is complaint of pain, you are now having to write use of force reports on a use of force that never occurred. And you're like, you placed handcuffs on him, but then you have to go by the numbers and you have to like damn near itemize every fucking move you did while putting handcuffs on him up until the point where he said there was a complaint of pain. And then you have to, it basically has to jive with whatever is shown on video. And you're like, even though the video is demonstrably false, there is no use of force. There's policies now at agencies where you still have to write it. You have to spend now, another 2 hours writing this, going over everything. And now you're having supervisors get involved in your report. And now there's all this oversight for nothing that happened just because someone wants to mess with you on a complaint of pain.
And people are too stupid to realize, and by people, I mean politicians, primarily, they're too stupid to realize that the streets don't change. I mean, they adapt, they become more aggressive because they realize that the more and more we restrict police from doing their job, the more brazen the bad guy gets. And we can all see it now. I mean, these guys, it's not even illegal to frickin' punch a cop in some cities now. So do you think that more people are going to punch a cop? Well, hell yeah.
Oh, yeah.
If the DA is not going to charge someone for hitting a cop, then it's a frickin' it's a freebie, man. I mean,
yeah.
It's open season on cops. And so now, the politicians that are crying about use of force or whatever, deadly force, they've just ramped it up to where cops now are having to escalate the force because they've got more aggressive combatants. And I'll be honest, in the 80s and early 90s, when I worked down South LA, those streets had been, I mean, it was a very violent community, but those streets had been tamed by very aggressive cops over the years to where, you could pull over a car and, I mean, the gangsters all had their hands out before you even got to the trunk. They knew the rules. And unless you caught them actually committing a crime, unless there was something that was going to send them back to prison, 95% of the time, those guys who were very dangerous and bad men would cooperate with the cops because they knew the rules.
Right.
And they'd tell you flat out, you don't run from Firestone, because if you run, inevitably, you're probably going to get force used on you at the end of that pursuit.
Right.
And
you're going to inevitably fight at the end when you're caught.
Right.
Yeah.
So anyway, I mean, it was a different time, and it's right now it's tough. It would be tough to be a cop today.
Well, here's what I want to point out to people who maybe don't understand in law enforcement is, so you have a couple of options, and this goes back to our episode if you want to go back to listen to our debrief of Rodney King with my old man. But when you tell cops, okay, you cannot beat the shit out of this guy. And you go, what? And you go, you cannot beat the shit out of this guy. And they go, what do you mean? You go, look, if you use physical force, if you have to get into a physical fight, you can't punch him, you can't kick, you can't do any of that stuff because it just looks terrible on camera. And you're just going to get, it's going to be cops brutalize another bad guy. You go, well, what am I supposed to do? Well, what's the other option? Shoot him. Right? Yeah. If you take away a cop's ability to just use actual brute force to get compliance, you have then taser or pepper spray or your gun. That's it. I mean,
I've been preaching that
a baton.
I've been preaching that since Rodney happened because, one of the things I said is, look, they'd taken away all of the tools from LAPD. I mean, back when Rodney got his ass kicked, which he didn't even get his ass kicked that bad, but when that happened, it looked awful. And the reason it looked awful is because the cops weren't allowed to jump in there and just choke the asshole out.
Right.
And I always said, if that was the sheriff's van pulled over and it was on videotape, it looked like a cartoon, like this cloud of dust and all these arms and legs sticking out. And it'd be like 20 seconds later, the cloud of dust be over and this guy be in handcuffs and he'd be bloody.
Yep.
And it would be over. It wouldn't look near as bad because, you know, the images of that use of force, it just, I mean, it just looked awful. It didn't look good.
Right.
I have to admit that.
No, it
didn't look good.
No.
But I also know that was the only thing that they could do. And everything they did was within policy and their use of force policy at that time. But it looked terrible to the people who were watching. You know, much like
fights are ugly.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of those baton strikes were missing and hitting the ground. So you see them swinging batons, but they're missing. So they continue to swing the batons. And then you're like, oh my God, they're hitting him so many times. But you see the batons bouncing off the ground. And you're like, fuck. It's not
There's
working because they're not hitting
a lot
him.
more to that than people understand.
I would ask bad guys after that. You know, I'd be taking someone to jail that was kind of, you know, talkative and cool, you know, not too pissed off about going to jail. I'm like, hey, man, what'd you think of Rodney King? You know, and I'll tell you, at least a half a dozen times I'd have a guy go, shit, man, he's lucky Firestone didn't get his ass. Or my daddy would have beat my ass worse than that. He didn't get shit. And they were pissed off.
But it was at a time in this country where it was, you know, things were just starting to be caught on videotape and be make the news. And unfortunately, a lot of suburban people were shook when, oh my gosh, is that what police have to do? Yes. Sometimes it's and it's ugly and we don't like it. But I mean, you know, we enjoy it's kind of like if you go back to watch, you know, shows where they depict the criminal organization's code, where if you're in the game, you're fair game. But if you're out, you're an innocent, you know, we recognize that, you know, there was a code. It's the same kind of a thing. It was like, you know, if the police have to come and get you, they're going to bring an ass whooping with them and you're going to have deserved it.
Right. You know, I compare it to, actually, and I won't take credit for it, a good buddy of mine, old partner. I call him Sonny and I'll leave it at that. But he used to, one of his analogies was, hey, this is basically what happened during the Rodney King and post Rodney King time era for cops is essentially what happened in the Vietnam War. Suddenly people who had no business knowing how ugly war was had it brought to them in their living rooms.
Right.
And they were repelled. And it's the same thing with police work. Police work is oftentimes not a pretty thing. But, you know, now everyone gets to see everything. LAPD puts, I'm sure you know this, they put every single officer involved shooting from the body cam on frickin' YouTube.
Yeah, smart.
And I wish the cops would get together and file a class action suit because, number one, I'm sure that it endangers their lives and their families' lives because they put the officer's name and everything about them, their pictures on there. And not to mention, what about the stress of that? I mean, reliving these shooting incidents, these traumatic incidents, it wears on you. And to know that it's out there on YouTube, that the whole world's watching the shooting you were involved in, maybe you killed a man. Are you kidding me? That's how you're going to treat your officers? There's no need for it. They're just trying to appease the public, and it's bullshit.
Well, and that's the thing from LAPD's perspective, it's smart, right? It's smart to have this channel where they can just put it all out there and say, look, we didn't do anything wrong. But you're right. It's the same. You go back to the onion field and you go back to what happened to poor Carl Hettinger. And for those of you who don't know, I'll give you a brief summary. 2 LAPD officers taken hostage. One of them murdered. The other one escaped, right? Unfortunately, the one who escaped gave up his gun during the altercation with the suspects. LAPD made him go to every station and every roll call, relive this horrible experience and tell all the other cops, don't do what I did.
Yeah.
And then couldn't figure out why he became an alcoholic and ended up a kleptomaniac working store security.
You know what's crazy is that you used to get brought on, and I had this talk with myself, and when I was coming on, is hit fast, hit hard, put him down quick. End of story. It looks a lot better. You're done. Then all of a sudden, body cameras came out, and you hit them fast, you hit them hard. Even though you're saying the same thing in a report, they're like, "Oh my God, you had to do that! You got into an actual fight," and they look down upon it, and then they don't look down upon the 5-minute long scuffle where you're pulling this suspect back and forth, and he's fighting and he's beating the shit out of officers, and finally you dogpile him onto the ground and you hook him up, and it looks like shit. Officers are getting hurt. Officers are going out injured. Workers' comp claims are going out the fucking wazoo, and you're like, man, this is going to get officers hurt. I really hope the pendulum comes and swings back and actually has officers back, and you say, hey, put them down, put them fast, quick, minimize the injury to yourself and to the suspect, because you're going to sit there and dance with this guy. You're going to get hurt. Other officers are going to get hurt. That's why you get even hurt, because it could lead to a deadly force situation where a shooting happens because you run out of all your options when you can just come up. He's like, fuck you, I'm not going to go it. He balls up his fist, gets into a fighting stance. Boom, you punch him in the face. You take him down. You do a leg sweep, whatever. He tries to grab your belt or whatever, and you punch him a couple times on the ground, put him into a wrist lock or an arm lock. Next thing you know, he's hooked up, but he's bleeding all over the fucking place. That's a lot better for officers than it is dancing with these suspects over and over, allowing all these shots to happen. Shots, what I mean, like punches and stuff like that to the face. Officers getting injured, they're twisting their knees, they're twisting their legs, they're fucking up their shoulders. It's crazy. At one point, there was word brought out: don't punch people in the face anymore. Use a palm strike. And you're like, okay, I can see a palm strike working for longevity, but if you're in an all-out fight, fuck a palm strike. Learn how to punch this dude square in the fucking face, or utilize a great takedown and, bend some fucking joint manipulation, some pain compliance, maybe use a lock. And if he keeps fighting and the shit gets popped and dislocated, oh well. But you can't just keep dancing around. You're going to see, and you can look on YouTube, and there's so many incidences where you see coppers dancing with these suspects, and cops are getting hurt, and they're put in really bad scenarios. And next thing you know, a shooting happens, or the shooting should have happened a long time ago, and you put all these citizens at danger, and then you have a shitty background, and you get into a shooting, and it doesn't look good, and it's very dangerous. Luckily, some of them go really well, and things are okay, but it could go the opposite way, and then the liability is put onto the agency because of their weak stance on use of forces when it comes to officer safety and, suspect safety. Because if you dance and do all this other stuff and all this time, time kills, and time can screw you. You have to hit hard, hit fast, put down quick.
No, you got to end it soon. You got to end it. You're going to get less injured. But Danny, you bring up a good point. When you put those videos on there, you're right. It seems that there is no consideration for the fact that these officers are going to relive these moments, and it's the worst moment of their life, arguably, in many, many, many cases. And yet it's just out there, and everybody's reporting on it, and people just take for granted that it's it's fine. No, it's got a very, very, very tough psychological effect on these people, because they're human fucking beings.
Right. Well, you know what? I mean, it's almost like internet bullying, and social media bullying. But I mean, obviously it's different than that. But what I'm saying is that, like when I was raising my daughters and social media was coming about and everything, one of the things that I recognized right away and put a stop to was this total access, because they'd be home, they wouldn't be at school, and home was no longer a safe place, because the people that were shitty to them at school would come right through their phones or their computers and be with them at home. So all of a sudden you'd be having a nice evening, and then someone just freaking did a 180, and they're grumpy, they're mad, they're pissed off, they're upset. And you realize, well, that's because someone just reached you when you're in your home. So I know it's a little bit of a stress, but it's the same thing. It's like, okay, so the cop, now he can't even be at peace when he goes home, because you know what? He goes to church on Sunday, and he's there to do whatever, and he's with his family. And, someone, as you guys know, civilians are the worst. They never consider that we don't want to talk about certain things, especially with civilians. But
which is why this podcast exists.
Right. And they'll walk up and ask you, hey, I saw your shooting on television. I mean, they don't even think that would put you in such, I mean, it knocks you off kilter. It puts you in a dark place. All of a sudden, I mean, some people, it's almost like a panic attack, because now all of a sudden you're reliving this thing. You're trying to you're off duty, you're with your family, and someone mentions it. It's just, I think it's terrible. I really do. I can see their logic in it is to be transparent, but you know what? I think it's overdone. I really do. And maybe in the most controversial shootings where their officer is 100% clean and they want to tell the public, here's the video, then I could see doing that. But you and I both know the public, at least the ones that are going to go out and burn a car, they don't give a shit anyway. So
yeah. Well, and it's 12 people that weren't smart enough to get out of jury duty.
Yeah.
Oh, that's what we used to call them. Anyway,
I lost a federal lawsuit, so trust me,
Oh,
I'm very aware of that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Danny, I appreciate you coming on. Why don't you tell us about your latest book? Because you said you've written novels, but the book it looks like you got next to you is your memoir. And why don't you tell us a little bit about that, where everybody can get it, and what's that about?
Yeah. All my books are available on Amazon or directly through me. My website is murdermemo.com. But the novels are all detective novels, and it's a series. And it's been wildly popular, and it kind of was one of those deals where I was actually started writing because my shrink said, "Hey, it'd be therapeutic, and you're a good writer." So I started writing, and that's the detective novels are pretty cool, and they're fun, and they're funny, and they're also heavy at times. But it took me a long time to write my memoir, and I kind of felt like I needed to, and I put it off, and I finally wrote it over the last year and a half or so, and published it in September. And I couldn't have written it back in 2004 when I retired. There's no way I could have written it the first 10 years. And even now, 18 years later, it brought everything back, talking about, what cops go through. All of a sudden now I start having nightmares again, and I start finding myself getting into a dark hole here and there. And the book, I encourage all your listeners, go on Amazon. You can read the first couple chapters free. And most people, I think if they read the first chapter, they're going to go, I got to find out what the fuck happened to this guy. Because the first chapter starts with my last day at work. And it was a heavy day. And then the next chapter goes back to the frickin' LA riots. But it's, the book has my career in a nutshell, a lot of the highlights, a lot of the cases, a pretty big section on my 7 years at Homicide, and it clearly demonstrates what cops go through, and it will leave no doubt in anyone's mind. There's not a cop on earth, well, at least not in our country, who would read it and not be able to relate to it. There's going to be a lot of parts of that book that people are going to go, oh yeah, man, oh yeah. Right. And the thing is that I tell the truth in there. I talk about how it broke me, and I know a lot of other cops that never admitted it, and some of those dear friends of mine, that's ended very tragically. So I felt compelled to write it and to tell the truth, and to not be all macho and shit, because the bottom line is, when I left the sheriff's department after 21 years in the fast lane, because I never had a slow assignment, I was broken, and I was embarrassed when I left. I was embarrassed that I was done working, and I was heartbroken too. I mean, it was like losing a loved one, like the death of a loved one, and it was really tragic. So, I think one of the reviewers, Book Life Review, I think it was, wrote in there that there's an undercurrent of despair, and I'd say, yeah, that's true.
It's probably true.
But it's a great book with a lot of war stories, a lot of interesting cases, homicide cases.
And it's called Nothing Left to Prove.
Nothing Left to Prove by Danny R. Smith.
By Danny Smith. Okay. And you can get that on Amazon. I think people should go, or murdermemo.com. That's your website?
Yep, murdermemo.com, DickieFloydNovels.com. That's the brand of my novels, Dickie Floyd Novels.
That's your Lucas Davenport. That's your Alex Cross.
Yeah, that's my Better Than Bush. I'll tell you this.
That's what we need to do. You got to get you a series.
Yeah, well, the problem is I'm not politically correct, and I don't know if you've noticed, but a lot of the authors now have gone very politically correct. So
yeah, that's my problem too. Is I'm not very politically correct either, and
no one's ever accused me of it ever.
No, and I despise it. I think language is a beautiful art form. I think words are a wonderful thing, and I think they have specific meanings. And I think if you're not a fucking grown up and you can't handle them, then you need to go back to the playpen and sit this one out. That's just.
I would drink to that, but I drain this son of a bitch and didn't bring a refill.
Well, damn it, we should have taken a break and let you pour it. Damn,
that's funny.
That's okay. I'm looking forward to one when we finish here.
Well, Danny, we certainly always give our guests an opportunity to dedicate their episodes to whomever they would like, and I know you ran this by us, and I'm all on board. So the dedication is yours. Please go ahead.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I gave a lot of thought to it, guys, and I'll be real honest. I've had several, well, more than several. I've had quite a few friends killed in the line of duty, and I've had a lot of friends also who have died as a result of their service in law enforcement, in different ways: suicide, guys drinking themselves to death, cancer, different things. So there's so much sacrifice that, when you asked me about that, I thought there's no way I could just pick one person to dedicate a show to and in their memory or anything else. So I thought, here's the thing, and I mentioned it earlier. Police work today is harder than it's ever been, and those officers out there, the men and women who are serving our communities today, they've got a much harder job than I had, and I applaud them. I praise them, and I would say I'd rather dedicate the show to all of the law enforcement officers out there today. They have my respect and my support and my prayers. God bless them.
Well, and I loved that, and I second that. And
Yeah.
to all you sheepdogs out there, and I know for a fact we've got guys right now in their car on graveyard shift, and they're out there freezing their ass off in the dead of winter, hunting, like you said. They're out being predators on the street, looking for that, broken taillight or that green Twinkie in a bag full of marshmallows, that wait for these episodes to drop and listen to this as they're driving around. So if you're in your car and you're listening to this right now, from all of us at War Stories, we want to dedicate this episode to you guys. So thank you, Danny. Thanks for coming on.
Hey, thanks so many, man. I enjoyed it.
Yeah. You're welcome. And there's so many people out there that need to hear that message and give them that extra vote of confidence that there are people out there that support them, and that they are doing the Lord's work and going out there and crushing crime as best as their ability that their city allows and their politicians allow. But they're out there putting their lives on the line for fucking strangers, and they need to hear that. And I thank you. And that's a powerful message to send out. So.
Yep.
Thank you, man.
Well, Danny, thank you. And for our audience, they can still get our t-shirts and our Woobie hoodies on our website. There's some sizes still available. Unfortunately, for the listener that was asking about smaller sizes, there was a limited quantity of those and they went fast. So next time, Chuck and I will learn to make a couple extra smaller sizes for the smaller listeners. But until our next episode, come home with your shield or on it.